The military gate guard looked at me then at my 10-year-old son standing beside me clutching a folded drawing against his chest. His face turned pale. For a few seconds he said nothing. Then he lowered his voice and delivered the sentence that shattered my family. "Ma'am, his girlfriend is inside the unit right now." I stared at him. Surely I had heard him wrong. My son Ethan looked up at me confused. "What did he say, Mom?" The guard swallowed. "I'm sorry, no visitors are being allowed in at the moment." Before Ethan could ask another question, I covered his ears with both hands. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might collapse right there in front of the security checkpoint. The drawing slipped from Ethan's fingers and fluttered to the pavement. On the front, written in large blue letters, were the words, "My dad is my hero." At that moment, I realized I was about to make a phone call that would change everything. But to explain why I need to go back several months. My name is Lisa Carter. For most of my adult life, I was proud to be an Army wife. Not because it was easy, because it wasn't. Anyone married to a service member understands the sacrifices. The birthdays spent alone. The anniversaries interrupted by deployments. The holidays where an empty chair sat at the table. Still, I believed those sacrifices meant something. My husband Ryan had served for nearly 20 years. He wasn't a general. He wasn't famous. He was simply a soldier who believed in duty. Or at least that was what I thought. We lived in a small Kentucky town not far from the installation where he was stationed. It wasn't glamorous. A modest house. A dependable pickup truck. Friday night football games. Church on Sundays. The kind of life many Americans would recognize. Our son Ethan was the center of it all. He was 10 years old and absolutely adored his father. If Ryan hung the moon, Ethan would have believed it. Every school project somehow became about the Army. Every drawing featured his dad. Every conversation circled back to military stories Ryan had told him. Sometimes I worried Ethan admired his father so much that disappointment would hit him harder than most children. At the time, I never imagined how right that fear would become. Ryan had spent much of the previous year away. Training assignments. Temporary duty. Long stretches where we relied on phone calls and video chats. Ethan handled the separation better than I did. He kept a large calendar taped to his bedroom wall. Every evening before bed, he crossed off another square. One day closer to Dad. I can still see him standing there with a red marker. Only 42 days left, Mom. Then 38. Then 27. Then 14. The closer the date got, the more excited he became. Ryan encouraged it. Every phone call ended the same way. "Love you, buddy. We'll have our big weekend soon." Ethan lived for those words. One evening about a month before Family Day, Ryan called while Ethan was finishing homework. "Put him on speaker," Ryan said. I did. Guess what Ryan asked? "What?" "When I see you next, we're spending the whole weekend together." Ethan nearly launched out of his chair. "Really?" "You have my word." "Can we go fishing?" "Absolutely." "What about batting practice?" "Yep." "And burgers?" Ryan laughed. "All the burgers you can eat." Ethan grinned so hard his cheeks hurt. That night he could barely sleep. I remember standing in his doorway after he drifted off. His calendar hung beside his bed. His baseball glove sat on a chair. A framed photograph of Ryan in uniform rested on the nightstand. It looked like the picture of a happy American family. Looking back, I wonder whether cracks were already forming. There were little things. Nothing dramatic. Ryan sometimes ended phone calls earlier than usual. Text messages occasionally went unanswered. He seemed distracted, distant. I noticed. Of course I noticed. After 20 years of marriage, you learn the rhythm of another person's voice. Something felt off. Whenever I asked if everything was okay, Ryan blamed stress. "Just tired." "Long week?" "Too much paperwork." Military life had taught me not to overreact. Stress was common. Exhaustion was common. Distance was common. I convinced myself that was all it was. Maybe I wanted to believe him. Maybe it was easier. Meanwhile, Ethan remained blissfully unaware. A few weeks before Family Day, he started working on a special gift. At the kitchen table, he spread markers, crayons, and construction paper across every available surface. "What are you making?" I asked. "A surprise." "Can I see?" "Nope. Not even a little." "Nope." I laughed. "All right." Several days later, he finally revealed it. The drawing showed a father and son standing beside a lake with fishing poles. Above them, in uneven blue letters, Ethan had written, "My dad is my hero." I felt tears sting my eyes. "It's beautiful," I said. "You think Dad will like it?" "He'll love it." At least I believed he would. As Family Day approached, excitement filled our house. Ethan laid out clothes days in advance. He packed snacks for the trip. He told everyone he knew that he would see his father soon. Teachers, neighbors, Cashiers at grocery stores. Anyone willing to listen. The night before our visit, he slept with the drawing beside his bed. I checked on him before turning in. He was smiling even in his sleep. That image still breaks my heart. Because the next morning we loaded into the car before sunrise and started driving toward the installation. Ethan held the drawing carefully in his lap the entire way. Every few miles he asked the same question. How much longer? I would smile and answer. Not long now. Neither of us knew our lives were speeding toward a moment neither would ever forget. A moment waiting behind a military gate. A moment that would expose the truth. The closer we got to the installation, the more excited Ethan became. He sat in the passenger seat beside me, his seatbelt snug across his chest, carefully holding that folded drawing, as if it were something priceless. In a way it was. Every crayon mark represented months of waiting. Every letter represented trust. Every color represented love. "Do you think Dad will be surprised?" he asked. "I think he will." "Do you think he'll hang it up?" "I hope so." He smiled and looked out the window. The Kentucky countryside rolled past us in shades of green and gold. Farmhouses, fields, old churches, the familiar landscape of home. For most of the drive I tried to focus on the road, but something inside me felt unsettled. Not fear exactly. Just a strange heaviness. The kind you can't explain. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was intuition. Years later, I still don't know. By mid-morning, we reached the military installation. The entrance was busier than usual. Families were arriving for family day activities. Children waved little American flags. Spouses carried picnic baskets and folding chairs. Everyone seemed happy, excited, proud. Ethan practically bounced in his seat. "Mom, look." He pointed toward a group of soldiers walking across a parking area. "Maybe Dad's over there. We have to check in first." "Okay." His grin never faded. I parked the car and gathered our paperwork. Ethan grabbed his drawing. Together we walked toward the security checkpoint. The guard station looked exactly as it always had. Concrete barriers, security cameras, uniformed personnel. Nothing unusual. Nothing that warned me our lives were about to change. A young gate guard greeted us. "Good morning, ma'am." "Morning." I handed him the documents. He reviewed them while Ethan stood beside me. "Here to see Sergeant Ryan Carter," I said. The guard nodded. His eyes moved across a computer screen. Then he frowned. Just slightly. At first I barely noticed. He typed something, paused, typed again. The silence stretched. A second guard approached and quietly looked at the monitor. The two exchanged a glance. My stomach tightened. "What is it?" I asked. Neither answered immediately. The younger guard cleared his throat. "Just one moment, ma'am." Now something definitely felt wrong. Ethan looked up at me. "Mom, it's okay." But I wasn't sure it was. The guard stepped away and spoke briefly into a radio. A few moments later he returned. His expression had completely changed. Gone was the routine professionalism. Now he looked uncomfortable, almost embarrassed. "Ma'am?" His voice lowered. I knew before he spoke that whatever came next would not be good. "Is there a problem?" I asked. He hesitated. Then came the sentence that changed everything. "His girlfriend is inside the unit right now." For a moment I couldn't process the words. They seemed disconnected from reality. Girlfriend. Inside the unit. My husband. My mind simply refused to accept it. "What?" The guard looked miserable. "I'm sorry, ma'am." Beside me, Ethan tugged my sleeve. "What did he say?" I felt my chest tighten. The world seemed to tilt. The guard continued carefully. "There are currently no visitors being allowed into that area. No visitors." The phrase barely registered. All I heard was girlfriend. Girlfriend. The word echoed through my head. Ethan looked back and forth between us. "What girlfriend?" Without thinking, I immediately covered his ears. My hands were shaking. "Not now," I whispered. His eyes widened. He had never seen me react like that. The guard looked down, as if he wished he were anywhere else. The drawing slipped from Ethan's hands and landed on the pavement. I stared at it. "My dad is my hero." The blue letters suddenly felt like a cruel joke. "Ma'am," the guard said quietly, "I'm very sorry." I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand answers. I wanted someone to tell me there had been a mistake. Instead, I stood there frozen. Because deep inside, something terrible was happening. Pieces of the past were rearranging themselves. The unanswered texts, the shortened calls, the distance in Ryan's voice, the growing emotional gap. Suddenly, none of it seemed random. Suddenly, it all made sense. Ethan bent down and picked up the drawing. "Mom," I forced a smile. The hardest smile of my life. "Let's go sit in the car for a minute." "Why?" "Just trust me." He looked confused but nodded. We walked back across the parking lot. Families continued arriving. Children laughed. Parents carried coolers. The world kept moving as though nothing had happened. Meanwhile, my marriage was collapsing. Inside the car, Ethan sat quietly. "Mom?" "Yeah." "What's wrong?" I gripped the steering wheel. How do you answer that question? How do you explain betrayal to a 10-year-old child who still believes his father is a hero? "You and Dad aren't fighting, are you?" My heart shattered. "No, sweetheart." "Then why were you upset?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. The freckles, the hopeful eyes, the innocent trust. He deserved better than what was happening. Far better. I just need to make a phone call. To Dad. Number. Who then? I stared through the windshield. A memory surfaced. A strong voice. A stern face. A man who had spent an entire lifetime teaching honor and responsibility. Ryan's father. Frank Carter. Retired Command Sergeant Major. The only person Ryan had ever openly feared disappointing. Not because Frank was cruel. Because Frank believed in integrity above everything else. As Ryan once told me, if my dad ever lost respect for me, that would destroy me. I had never forgotten those words, and now they returned with perfect clarity. My hand still trembled as I reached for my phone. Part of me wanted to call Ryan first, to confront him directly, to demand explanations, but another part of me knew something. If I called Ryan now, he would lie. He would minimize. He would delay. He would manipulate the story before the truth surfaced. Number. Not this time. This time he would face someone who couldn't be deceived. Someone who had spent decades leading soldiers and recognizing excuses. Someone who valued honor more than reputation. I found Frank's number. My finger hovered above the screen. For several seconds I couldn't move. Making this call would change everything. There would be no going back. No pretending. No easy escape. I looked over at Ethan. He sat quietly, still holding the drawing. Still believing. Still waiting to see his father. That image made my decision. I pressed the call button. The phone rang once. Twice. Then I heard Frank's familiar voice. "Lisa." I swallowed hard. "Frank." Immediately he sensed something was wrong. "What's happened?" My eyes filled with tears. I looked toward the military gate where our family had just fallen apart. Then I answered. And with that single conversation, Ryan's carefully hidden life began to unravel. I sat in my car outside the military installation, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. For a few seconds after I spoke, Frank Carter said nothing. The silence on the line felt heavier than any words. Then came a slow exhale. "Tell me exactly what happened." His voice was calm, controlled. The same voice that had spent decades leading soldiers. The same voice that had guided Ryan through childhood. I swallowed. Then I told him everything. The drive, the excitement, the gate, the guard, the girlfriend, the humiliation, every detail. Frank never interrupted. Not once. When I finally finished, there was another long silence. "I see," he said. Those two words frightened me more than shouting would have. Because Frank wasn't a man who reacted emotionally. He reacted deliberately. "Frank, yes. What do I do?" His answer came immediately. "Right now you take Ethan home. That's it." For now. I closed my eyes. Part of me wanted immediate action. Immediate justice. Immediate consequences. Instead, Frank sounded almost methodical. "I need facts before I do anything." I heard it from the guard. "And I believe you." "Then why?" "Because accusations aren't enough." His tone remained steady. "If Ryan has done what it appears he's done, I want the truth. Not rumors, not assumptions. The truth." I knew he was right. I hated that he was right. "Can you do that?" "Yes." Then his voice softened. "How's Ethan?" That question nearly broke me. I looked at my son. He sat quietly beside me, staring out the window. Still holding his drawing. Still waiting. Confused. Frank was silent again. Then he said something I would never forget. Children always pay the highest price for adult selfishness. The call ended shortly afterward. I started the engine. The drive home felt much longer than the drive there. For nearly 30 minutes, Ethan barely spoke. Finally, he looked over. "Mom." "Yeah." "Did Dad get called away?" The question hit me like a punch. I realized he was trying to explain the situation to himself. Trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. "I don't know yet." "Will we see him today?" I couldn't answer. "Not honestly. I'm not sure." He stared down at the drawing. For the first time since making it, he folded it shut. That simple gesture hurt more than I can describe. When we got home, Ethan disappeared into his room. I stood alone in the kitchen. The house felt different. Smaller somehow. as though the walls themselves knew something had changed. That evening Ryan called. His name appeared on my phone screen. For a moment I simply stared at it. Then I answered. "Hey," he said casually. Casually, as if our lives hadn't exploded a few hours earlier. "How was family day?" I nearly laughed. Not because anything was funny, because the absurdity stunned me. "You tell me." Silence. Just for a second. A tiny hesitation. But I heard it. "What does that mean?" "Ryan." Another pause. Longer this time. My stomach turned. He knew. The moment I spoke his name, he knew. "Lisa." "Number..." I cut him off. "Don't." His breathing changed. "I can explain." "Of course." The oldest sentence in the world. The sentence people use when they've been caught. "Can you?" "It's complicated." I closed my eyes. There it was. Not denial. Not confusion. Not shock. Complicated. The language of guilt. "Your son waited months to see you." "Lisa." "Your son carried a drawing all the way to the gate." "Please let me explain." I felt tears burning behind my eyes. "Number." This time my voice was ice cold. "You don't get to explain to me tonight." Then I hung up. The phone immediately rang again. And again. And again. I ignored every call. By the next morning Frank called. "I need to see you." 2 hours later he arrived at my house. At 72 years old, Frank still carried himself like a soldier. Straight back. Sharp eyes. Quiet authority. He stepped inside and sat at my kitchen table. For several moments neither of us spoke. Then he placed a folder in front of me. My heart sank. "What's that?" "Information." I opened it. Inside were photographs, records, messages. Enough evidence to erase every remaining doubt. The relationship had not started recently. It had been going on for months, maybe longer. The girlfriend wasn't a misunderstanding. She wasn't a rumor. She was real, very real. I felt physically sick. Frank watched quietly. I had hoped I was wrong. So did I. I wasn't. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, I asked the question that had haunted me all night. How many people knew? Frank's expression hardened. More than should have. That answer hurt. Not because strangers knew. Because I hadn't. The wife. The mother of his child. The person who trusted him most. I had been the last person to learn the truth. Frank leaned back. His face looked older than usual. Tired. Disappointed. Not angry. Disappointed. Which somehow felt worse. Ryan called me. I looked up. What did he say? He said he made mistakes. Mistakes. Frank's jaw tightened. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. The room grew silent. A mistake is missing a phone call. His eyes locked onto mine. A second life isn't a mistake. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something changing inside me. The grief remained. The betrayal remained. But another feeling emerged. Clarity. I wasn't dealing with confusion anymore. I wasn't chasing answers. I had answers. Now came consequences, not revenge fueled by rage. Something colder. Something steadier. Truth. Frank seemed to sense the shift. What are you thinking? I looked toward the hallway leading to Ethan's room. I'm thinking about my son. Frank nodded. Good. Not Ryan. Ryan made his choices. The words landed heavily. Ethan didn't. That afternoon Frank left. But before walking out the door he stopped. There will be a conversation. With Ryan? Yes. When? His eyes became very still. Soon. What's going to happen? Frank stared toward the American flag hanging on our front porch. Then he answered. Ryan is about to face the one thing he's spent his entire life avoiding. What? Frank's voice dropped almost to a whisper. The truth about the man he's become. As I watched him drive away, I realized something important. The worst part wasn't over. Not even close. Because somewhere across town, Ryan still believed he could explain his way out of this. He still believed words might save him. What he didn't understand was that his father already knew everything. And Frank Carter was preparing a reckoning unlike anything Ryan had ever faced. Ryan arrived at Frank's house 3 days later. I wasn't there when he first walked through the door, but Frank later described it to me in detail. Ryan thought he was coming for a conversation. He thought he was coming to explain. He thought he still had control. He was wrong. Frank had invited both of us. Me, Ryan, and eventually Ethan. Not to create a scene. Not to humiliate anyone. To force the truth into the open. By the time I arrived, Ryan's truck was already parked outside. My stomach twisted as I stepped onto the porch. For 20 years I had walked through doors expecting to see my husband. This was the first time I felt like I was walking toward a stranger. Frank opened the door. He didn't smile. He simply nodded and stepped aside. Inside, Ryan sat at the dining room table. The moment our eyes met, I saw exhaustion. His face looked older. His shoulders slumped. His confidence was gone. For a second, I remembered the young soldier I had fallen in love with decades earlier. Then I remembered the gate, the guard, the girlfriend, and the memory vanished. Lisa. I didn't answer. Frank closed the door. The click of the latch sounded strangely final. Ryan looked toward his father. "Dad, please." Frank raised a hand. "Number." The room immediately fell silent. Even now, years later, I can still remember the authority in that single word. Ryan looked down. For the first time in his life, he looked like a little boy sitting across from his father. Frank took a seat. Then he folded his hands. "I have one question." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Frank's eyes locked onto Ryan. "Did you abandon your family while your son waited for you?" The room felt frozen. Ryan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. The silence itself became an answer. Frank nodded once, slowly, painfully, as I suspected. "Dad." "Number." Again. Just one word, but it carried the weight of decades. Ryan rubbed his face. "You don't understand." Frank's expression hardened. "Then help me understand." Ryan struggled. "I never meant for this to happen." The excuse sounded weak even before it left his mouth. I could see he knew it. Frank leaned forward. "When did it start?" Ryan hesitated. That hesitation said everything. Months. Not days. Not weeks. Months. Maybe longer. I felt my heart sink all over again. Some betrayals don't hurt once. They hurt repeatedly. Every new detail becomes another wound. "You lied to your wife." Ryan stared at the table. "You lied to your son." Silence. "You lied to yourself." Still silence. Then Frank asked the question Ryan clearly feared most. "When did your words stop meaning something?" The room went completely still. Ryan looked genuinely stunned. Not by the accusation, by the disappointment. His father wasn't attacking him. He was grieving him, and somehow that was worse. "I don't know," Ryan whispered. Frank sat back. "Neither did I. Because somewhere along the way the man I married had disappeared. The trustworthy husband, the devoted father, the soldier who believed in honor. Where had he gone? And when, after nearly an hour, there were no more excuses left? Every explanation collapsed under its own weight. Stress, loneliness, distance, work. None of it justified what he'd done. Finally, Ryan stopped defending himself. And for the first time, he simply told the truth. "I was selfish." The words hung in the air. "I kept thinking I'd fix it before anyone got hurt." I laughed bitterly. "Before anyone got hurt." Ryan closed his eyes. He knew. He finally knew. The damage wasn't theoretical anymore. It had names, faces, a wife, a son, a father, people who had trusted him. Frank stood. Without a word, he walked into another room. When he returned, he carried something folded in his hand. I recognized it immediately. Ethan's drawing. "My dad is my hero." Ryan stared at it, his face drained of color. I don't think he had seen it before. Frank carefully placed it on the table. Nobody spoke. Ryan looked at the drawing for a long time, long enough that I noticed tears gathering in his eyes. Then he picked it up, very gently, as if touching something sacred. "What is this?" Frank asked. Ryan swallowed. "A drawing. Number." Frank's voice was quiet. It was trust. The words hit harder than any shouting could have. Ryan's shoulders began to shake. For the first time he cried. Not dramatic tears. Not performative tears. The kind that come when denial finally dies. The kind that come when a person sees themselves clearly and doesn't like what they see. A few hours later, Ethan arrived. That part terrified me. I didn't know how the meeting would go. Neither did Ryan. When Ethan walked into the room, he immediately noticed his father. Then he stopped. No excitement. No running forward. No smile. Just silence. Ryan stood. "Hey, buddy." Nothing. Ethan looked away. The rejection visibly hurt Ryan. I watched it happen. And I won't lie. Part of me thought he deserved it. Because children don't measure pain the way adults do. They don't understand affairs. They don't understand betrayal. They understand one thing. You showed up. Or you didn't. Ryan took a step forward. "Ethan, why weren't you there?" The question came quietly. Ryan froze. The room seemed to stop breathing. "Buddy, why weren't you there?" No anger. No shouting. Just heartbreak. That was worse. Far worse. Ryan looked completely helpless. Because there was no answer a child could accept. No explanation good enough. No excuse strong enough. Finally, he whispered, "I made a terrible mistake. Ethan nodded once. Then he looked down at the floor. Okay. Just okay. Nothing more. Then he walked into the next room, leaving Ryan standing there alone. The silence afterward felt enormous. Frank finally spoke. You wanted consequences. Ryan looked at him. This is one. And he was right. No military punishment. No public scandal. No courtroom. No headline. Just a son who no longer looked at his father the same way. For Ryan, that hurt more than anything else ever could. As evening settled outside the windows, I realized something important. The lies had collapsed. The affair was over. The truth was exposed. But accountability was only beginning. Because forgiveness had not arrived. Trust had not returned. And Ryan was about to learn that rebuilding a broken family takes far longer than destroying one. Part 5. The call he couldn't avoid. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. By then, nearly 3 weeks had passed since the day my son and I were turned away at the rehab center. 3 weeks since a guard had looked me in the eye and told me my husband's girlfriend was inside. 3 weeks since my little boy had stood there clutching a toy truck wondering why his father didn't want to see him. And 3 weeks since I made the phone call that changed everything. My husband had no idea what was waiting for him. Neither did I. The conference room inside the rehabilitation facility was small and plain. A long table, several chairs, a coffee machine humming quietly in the corner. The facility administrator sat at one end. The state investigator sat beside her. A representative from the Veterans Advocacy Office joined remotely by video. I sat near the middle. My attorney sat beside me. And finally they wheeled my husband into the room. For a moment I barely recognized him. Not because of his injuries, because of his expression. He looked tired, older, smaller, like someone who had spent weeks carrying a weight he could no longer hold. Then his eyes found mine, and immediately dropped. He knew. Before a single word was spoken, he knew. The administrator began calmly. This meeting concerns visitation restrictions, unauthorized access to patient information, and possible financial misconduct involving patient benefits. The room became very quiet. Then she started laying out evidence. Security records, visitor logs, phone records, witness statements, photographs, documentation. Every piece fit together perfectly. The investigator asked direct questions. The answers became harder and harder for Denise to explain. She denied things, then adjusted her story, then contradicted herself, then blamed misunderstandings. But facts don't care about excuses. Eventually the truth emerged. Not all at once, slowly, painfully, like a wound reopening. Denise had been controlling access to my husband for months. She had manipulated schedules, influenced staff members, intercepted communication, restricted family visits, and inserted herself into nearly every aspect of his recovery. Not because she loved him, because she wanted control. Control over his finances, control over his decisions, control over his future. When confronted with the evidence, she finally stopped arguing. The silence that followed felt enormous. My husband sat motionless, staring at the table. His hands trembled. The administrator looked directly at him. Mr. Walker, do you understand what has occurred? He nodded slowly. Yes. His voice barely carried across the room. The investigator continued. Do you wish to revoke all visitation privileges previously granted to Denise Carter? Another long pause. Then, yes. No hesitation. No uncertainty. Just one broken word. Yes. Something ended in that moment. Not dramatically. Not with shouting. Not with revenge. Just truth. And sometimes truth is more powerful than anger. The facility completed its review over the next several days. Denise lost all access. Her privileges were revoked permanently. Additional findings were forwarded to the appropriate agencies for further review. I never saw her again. And honestly, I didn't want to. By then my focus had changed. The revenge I thought I wanted no longer mattered. What mattered was the little boy who still loved his father, and the man who finally understood how much damage had been done. A week later, I brought my son back to visit. This time, nobody stopped us. The receptionist smiled warmly. He's been waiting all morning. My son lit up. Really? Really? He ran ahead before I could stop him. A nurse pointed us toward the therapy garden. When we reached the courtyard, my husband was sitting beneath a maple tree. The moment he saw our son, tears filled his eyes. Dad! My son sprinted across the grass. My husband opened his arms, and somehow, despite the braces and limitations and pain, he managed to hold him. Neither spoke for several seconds. They simply hugged. The kind of hug that heals things words can't touch. I stood back and watched. The anger I'd carried for months softened. Not disappeared, but softened. Because revenge had already done its job. The truth had been exposed. Consequences had arrived. Now something harder remained. Healing. My husband looked up at me. His eyes were red. "I'm sorry." I nodded. "I know." "No," he said quietly. "You don't." My son wandered toward a flower bed nearby, giving us a rare moment alone. My husband took a shaky breath. "I failed both of you." The words hung between us. I thought I was protecting myself from loneliness. He looked away. But I ended up abandoning the people who loved me most. I listened, not because forgiveness had arrived, but because accountability finally had. He continued. "I can't change what happened. No. I can't erase the damage. No." His eyes filled again. "But if you'll let me, I'd like to spend whatever time I have left trying to be better." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The wind rustled through the trees. Birds chirped somewhere beyond the garden wall. Life moving forward, as it always does. Finally, I answered. "Being better starts with showing up." He nodded. "I will." And for the first time in a very long time, I believed him. Not completely. Trust takes time, but enough. Months passed. Recovery continued. Slowly, painfully, but steadily. My husband worked harder than anyone expected. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, counseling, family sessions. Every step mattered, and every week he showed up. Not perfectly, not magically transformed, just consistently. For our son, for himself. For us, the marriage wasn't instantly repaired. Real life doesn't work that way. The scars remained. Some always would. But honesty replaced secrecy. Responsibility replaced excuses. And little by little, something new began growing where the damage had once been. One afternoon, nearly a year later, our son sat beside his father on the front porch. They were watching a baseball game on a small radio, laughing together, arguing over statistics, enjoying something simple, something ordinary, something precious. I stood in the doorway watching them, and I realized something important. The greatest revenge had never been exposing Denise. It wasn't the investigation. It wasn't the consequences. It wasn't seeing lies collapse. The greatest revenge was refusing to let bitterness destroy the rest of our lives, because bitterness would have taken my future too. Instead, I chose truth, then boundaries, then healing, and eventually grace. Not because anyone deserved it, because carrying anger forever is its own prison. If there's one lesson I've learned, it's this. When someone betrays your trust, don't rush to destroy them. Expose the truth. Protect the people who depend on you. Hold others accountable, but never lose yourself in revenge. Justice and revenge are not the same thing. Justice restores. Revenge alone often destroys. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is stand firm long enough for truth to do the work. And when the dust settles, choose the future instead of the pain. If this story touched you, think about someone in your life who may need forgiveness, accountability, or simply a second chance. Share this story with a friend or family member who believes it's too late to rebuild trust. And if stories about resilience, family, and real-life lessons speak to your heart, I'd be honored if you joined me again for another journey. Thank you for listening.